How to become an expert on Iran's nuclear program. Point 1. Know your basics. Now this is really confusing because you think, okay, there's some uranium, then the uranium becomes a bomb, then somebody rides it down to the ground, and then they've blown up basically Japan in 1945. Whoa, stop. It's not that easy. If it was that easy, frankly, we'd be worrying about 200 countries rather than about the Islamic Republic. Basic low-enriched uranium is around a percentage which may be 3.5 to 5%. Now when uranium's in this state, it's raw material. You might try to use it to power a reactor. You might use it to develop further for civilian programs, but you're not going to stick it on a nearby missile and say, whoops, goodbye Jerusalem. Even when you take uranium to 20%, it's not military uranium. 20% uranium, for example, is used for medical isotopes. Now, medical isotopes are in fact very, very important, not for destroying lives, but for saving them. So if you've got 20%, you're still okay. But here's where it gets tricky, because that 20% could, in theory, become 95%. And when you have 95% uranium, you're not talking about curing cancer patients, you're talking about wreaking some pain on someone you don't really like. So you need to know your numbers. And then you need to go to point 2. So is Iran on the verge of 95% uranium to put atop missiles to threaten countries in the Middle East? No. The International Atomic Energy Agency is the main body that tries to regulate and inspect nuclear programs around the world. Not just Iran, but the United States, Europeans. Oh, not the Israelis, because they haven't signed up to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but we'll leave that for now. Now, Iran has signed up to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which means the IAEA goes out from time to time and looks at many of Iran's facilities. They have said in report after report after report over the last 5 years, Iran has not diverted, to our knowledge, any uranium to military use. It is also true and should be noted that the IAEA has said, however, we have not inspected all of Iran's facilities. We would like transparency on their part. The key point here is it's an unknown unknown, and there is no evidence that Iran is on the verge of the capability, let alone the intention, to develop a nuclear bomb. Point 3. So if that's the case, why the big fuss? Why do we get these articles that say Iran will have a bomb within a year? That's called spin, folks. Now, it doesn't necessarily, it's a lie, because that's a naughty term, but it is spin to use to get political advantage. And for the last few years, to get political advantage, the U.S., Europeans, and Israel have repeatedly put out the line to journalists who are willing to publish it that Iran is just around the corner from a bomb. So why does the story keep reappearing? Because the nuclear issue isn't really, in the end, about nuclear weapons. The nuclear issue is a pawn in a much bigger chess game, a chess game of power. The United States and the Europeans have issues with Iran over a number of things. They don't like Iran's presence or relationship to groups in Palestine or in Lebanon. They don't like the idea that Iran is trying to establish a regional base which could threaten the Americans and the Europeans in their own interest. The nuclear issue is the way to basically keep a thumb on the Islamic Republic. The whole point about this is it's the threat. It's not the reality of uranium that is dictating how we approach Iran.